Welcome into beautiful Los Angeles, California. I'm Bill Reiter. This is Reiter's Block. We got a great show planned for you. Reid Forgrave going to swing by to talk some NBA. Russell Wilson's a very wealthy man. Will be in Seattle for at least 4 more years. And some NBA playoff talk, all starting right now. We got some trouble in the NBA's kingdom of certainty. The Golden State Warriors blew a huge lead last night. You know about it. And bad news swirling all around that loss. Look, nobody thinks, I don't think, they're going to lose to the Clippers in a 7-game series. But the loss of Boogie Cousins is significant. We'll get to that in a second. Steph Curry, and I'm a huge Steph believer. I love Steph. But he has never won an NBA. He's never been an NBA Finals MVP. He has not hit some of the big shots in the moments where he could have. Last night had a chance, could not do it. And Kevin Durant continues to practice the very clear disappearing act / put out petulance over whatever's going on in that locker room or with his impending free agency. And all of it added up last night in that loss to not just an embarrassment for a Golden State team that should never blow a 15-point lead, let alone one that's more than twice that. It was also a very frustrated Steve Kerr, who over the years has gotten us guys for a lot of things, but the idea of just not caring, that feels like a first.
Our defense was great for 2.5 quarters, and then we stopped defending. When I say we stopped playing, we stopped playing. Defense, offense, execution-wise, we were not as engaged as we needed to be, and we got exactly what we deserved.
All right, let's start with the fact that Boogie is out for the foreseeable future. There's a narrative out there, I think it's wrong, that Cousins doesn't really matter to this Warriors team. If you crunch the numbers, they're better technically when he's on the bench than when he's on the floor. But the reality is that playoff basketball is different. It's about stars, rotation shortened, they often change. And the Warriors gave away all of their depth to bring in Kevin Durant. That was missing last year, and Boogie's able to make up for that, especially in the postseason. His injury is significant, and take a look at Sportsline's projections for what the absence of DeMarcus Cousins means for the Warriors. Their odds of winning this series against the Clippers, still 92.3%, as you can see, but down 2.1%. But to win in the second round, down to 71%, a huge drop in probabilities from 8% down. To win the Western Conference Finals and make the finals, all the way down to 60%. That's nearly a 13% drop. And here's the big one, to win the whole thing. What we all feels like is this coronation and process disguised as the NBA playoffs, down to 44.3%. Less than a coin flip, nearly a 20% drop. Here's the reality. And this wasn't necessarily true before Boogie went down. Here's the fact. This run for the Warriors, they win the whole thing, they lose, they're heroes, they're disappointments. Forget what comes in July. What happens between now and mid-June for the Warriors in the NBA is entirely about Kevin Durant. His greatness, his natural talent, it is beyond question. A 2-time Finals MVP, a regular season most valuable player. If he's not the most talented scorer in the history of the NBA, he's in that conversation. He's one of those 2 or 3 or 4 guys. But we've had so many signs of trouble over the year. And Bill Parcells said this. It's true in basketball as much as the NFL. It's true in life. People tell you who they are. Listen, so do teams. And Kerr's frustration you heard there is in large part about the fact and the reality this Warriors team together, chemistry, what they're about when we're not looking, and sometimes when we are, that is not the same as the last 3 or 4 years, and that's a problem. Let me take you back here. We'll show you a little bit of this. Remember the Kevin Durant, Draymond Green fracas, fiasco, ego battle, whatever it was that began on the bench, extended to the floor, and became a suspension for Draymond and a real issue in that locker room. Draymond Green's mom last night taking shots at Kevin Durant for reasons, we're not going to get into mom on Durant crime, but for reasons that we'll get into. So you've got that fact, that Kevin Durant, for whatever reason, whoever's to blame, it's probably KD, doesn't fit into that culture the way that it worked before he was there. He just doesn't. And then you've got his looming free agency, where he's going to go, talking to sources around the NBA today on the drive to the show and just in the last few days. It's the same noise and chatter as it's been for about a month. People don't know. They think he could stay in Golden State, but almost everyone believes, if they had to guess today, if they had to bet, that he's going to New York City. And Durant said something in the lead up to the game that was really interesting. You can see it here. Just watch the game. Just focus on the game and stop nitpicking because it is a beautiful game going on out there. What can I do right now? I can't sign a paper. I got to do the most important thing and get out there and play. The problem is he hasn't gotten out there and played. He played badly last night. And of course, there's going to be concern, questions about whether or not he's leaving. His own teammate, Draymond Green, from that thing we showed you, that's what that was about. That was what some of the words Draymond threw his direction. This has gone on all season. I'll take you back a few months because I know it feels like it's a little old, but I think it's pertinent to what's happening right now. This weird, passive, petulant thing that KD is bringing to a Warriors team that used to play with so much joy. And speaking of joy, usually that's what they're about. They had a stretch where Steve Kerr asked the guys to play with a little more anger, be a little more resolute. And Kevin Durant did something we haven't seen with the Warriors since Kerr got there. At a press conference afterwards, talking to the media, pretty clearly threw his coach under the bus.
I thought we move off of joy. Now anger.
That's what your coach said.
Oh, okay. I disagree with that.
Miserable employees, even the superstar variety, make for miserable workplaces, and that includes the NBA. And again, more of this Kevin Durant disappearing / anger thing back and forth. In game one, as you can see here, if you remember, Patrick Beverley, who is a master provocateur who climbs into people's heads, superstars' heads for a living, got into KD's head. KD gets ejected. And what happens in game two? What's the response from Kevin Durant? As we'll get to in a minute, he got shut down last night. He was a non-factor. I know the Warriors had a big lead, but Kevin Durant, when the tide starts to turn against you, when the Clippers march back, especially when Steph's in foul trouble, you're the guy that's supposed to show up and get it done. And you can see afterwards, Beverley taking a lot of joy in the fact, at least mentally, at least for a night, he owned Kevin Durant.
I don't try to get in people's head, man. I can't help people get irritated by me. It's not my fault. I go out there, I try to be the best defender on this planet, consistently, in and out, day and out. I take my role, take my job very seriously, and I do it for my teammates.
Which is what brings all of this back to the moment, back to you as you try to make your decisions on which lines. And I was on the Warriors last night, so I hate that collapse you want to believe in. Kevin Durant is a guy who at times can be and is a passive loser. When the going gets tough, he can sometimes turn away from his responsibilities. Last night, right, in response to what happened with Beverley, the guy had more turnovers than he had points, and he fouled out. And if you watch the game, there was just this lackadaisical, I don't care insouciance about Kevin Durant and where he was at and what he was doing. I know he's an incredible talent. I get it. I've covered him before. I understand he's capable of being the best player, not just on his team, but on the floor in the NBA on any given night in the postseason. But we've seen this story before. Let me take you back to 2015, the Western Conference Finals, ironically up against the Warriors 3-1, and Durant utterly and totally vanished. In games 5 to 7, the guy shot 39% from the field, 27% on threes. That is markedly lower than career highs, than his career averages, than what he should be doing. This is a guy in the past who has disappeared. In Game 6 in particular, that series, Durant was awful at home in Oklahoma City, a closeout opportunity. So here's the reality for the Warriors. As talented as they are, as much experience as they have, they don't love each other the way that they used to. I don't know if it's KD's fault. I don't know if it's Draymond Green's fault. And I love analytics, sabermetrics as much as the next guy. But I'm telling you, talking to agents, talking to GMs over the years, over the last few weeks, the number one thing they'll tell you, the reality behind the scenes for people connected who covered the NBA, if teams don't like one another, they will not succeed in the postseason in 7-game series after 7-game series. This series and what happens in the NBA between now and mid-June, whoever lifts that trophy, is about Kevin Durant. Kevin Durant, the teammate. That guy has got to connect with his teammates at least in a shared purpose. And Kevin Durant, the player. If he can get along and go along until he bolts for New York or stays or whatever he's doing, and if he can show up and be willing to actually take some shots, they can get it done. If he can't, they won't. And one more thing, over his first 72 games, just to put this in perspective, Durant averaged 18 shots per game, about 18 and a half, 27 points per game, a little bit less than that. The 8 games since, including these 2 playoff games, not even 10 shots per game, not even 18 points per game. The guy has gone into a shell. We've seen this before. He's having trouble with the fact that he may or may not be leaving. Kevin Durant, it is entirely about you and what happens to the Golden State Warriors. If he's the best version of himself, the guy that was an NBA MVP, Finals MVP the last couple of years, Warriors are going to roll. If he's the guy who was in 2015 when the going got tough against the Warriors up 3-1, if he's the guy he's been a few times this season when he's mad at his coach, when he's mad at Draymond Green, get ready for a surprise we did not see coming. All right, that's my perspective. I'm going to get Reid Forgrave. He's more of a Durant fan than I am. He covers the NBA for CBS Sports HQ, and we are going to get into the richest, at least by money per year, contract in NFL history. All that coming up, starting with Reid Forgrave on Writer's Block here on CBS Sports HQ when we come back after these messages. All right, welcome into Los Angeles, or back into Los Angeles, California. I'm Bill Reiter, joined now by my colleague here at CBS Sports HQ, NBA insider, NBA writer, Reid Forgrave. Reid, thanks for being here, buddy.
Absolutely, brother. I'm loving this NBA playoffs, and I'm loving that here in the Upper Midwest, it is spring. Took too long.
All right, we've had some disagreements over Kevin Durant on this show, on the radio show over the last year. Just spent a good 7 or 8 minutes expressing my skepticism, my concerns about KD, the teammate, and KD, the player right now. Awful game last night, incredibly passive, didn't show up for his media obligations. As a guy that's been a lot more, I think, understanding and seeing Kevin Durant's season through a more positive lens than I have, what do you make of where KD and the Warriors are at right now?
Yeah, shocking moment here. Bill and Reid disagreeing about Kevin Durant. Actually, I got to be honest, I don't completely disagree with you here. He was terrible in this performance. He was awful. He had more turnovers than he had shot attempts. By the way, Draymond Green's mom retweeted a tweet saying that, oh my gosh, have you ever seen this before? Kevin Durant having more turnovers than shot attempts. This portends to possibly bad chemistry within the locker room when you get the moms involved. Look, KD was terrible. It also reminds me, remember in that Rockets series last year, when this team was absolutely on the ropes, KD was terrible then, too. He had 2 games where he was playing Kevin Durant basketball, not Warriors basketball, and frankly, they almost lost that series because of it. But, Bill, this is, do we just blame Kevin Durant for this loss? I don't think so. They were up 31 points. There's no excuse for losing when you're up 31 points. Steph Curry gets that really silly 4th foul in the 3rd quarter. That really threw out their rotation. Kevin Durant, when we look at him, 4 of his fouls were offensive fouls. Is that a foul of laziness? No, it's a foul of carelessness. And to be honest, the foul that was called on him, the charge call with Montrezl Harrell with about 2:30 left in the game, I thought that was a bad call. Whatever, one call doesn't decide the game. I thought the refs did a great job. But if that foul is called on Harrell instead of on KD, they're up 8 points instead of being down up 5 and giving the Clippers the ball. So look, he was a bum. He was an absolute bum. I hated that he didn't speak to media afterwards. He's so sensitive. But this isn't all on him. This was a team loss.
All right, so I understand your Rockets comparison, and not to take shots at the Clippers, that was the Rockets. This is this year's Clippers team. How worried are you, not about this series, but just that the Warriors' march of invincibility may not be so invincible after all?
I think they're more vulnerable than they've been in their entire run. And yet, I don't think they're particularly vulnerable, at least and not until the NBA Finals. I don't think they're going to lose to the Rockets. I know the Rockets have been awesome the past couple months, not just because James Harden has been absolutely bonkers, because the Rockets' defense has been really, really good. That's kind of the key to why the Rockets were so good last year, because they were able to D up. This defense is top 5 in defensive efficiency the past couple months. But I still think the Rockets are a little bit of a worse team than they were a year ago. And I still think the Warriors are the Warriors. I know this idea of DeMarcus Cousins lost. They're losing an all-star, and he's probably gone for the rest of the playoffs. That seems on paper that that's a really big deal. Well, guess what? The Warriors are actually better when DeMarcus Cousins is on the bench than he is when he's on the floor. That's how the numbers bear out. So am I worried about the Rockets or about the Warriors? Absolutely. I'm worried about them more than I have been during this run. But that doesn't actually mean that I'm really, really worried about them. They're not going to lose to the Clippers. As awesome of a story as this Clippers season has been, they just don't have the talent to compare to a mostly healthy Warriors team. So to me, yeah, could they lose to the Rockets? Certainly. Do I think they will? I'd give it like a 90% chance that they win that series, and probably still a 60% chance they end up winning it all.
Reid, what do you make of the Sixers' historic record-breaking response to the Nets' win in the opening part of that series?
My goodness. First of all, these Nets are so much fun. Like, buy me stock in this Nets team because the culture they have, all these guys who are just picked up off the scrap heap and turned into valuable NBA players. Go Sean Marks. That's incredible. What the Sixers always have been, frankly, going into this playoffs, they were always going to be the team with the smallest margin of error, a team that has, frankly, a pretty low floor. They have a really high ceiling, and that's what we saw in that third quarter last night. We saw what this ceiling for this Sixers team is. When Joel Embiid isn't taking 5 3-pointers in the first half like he did in game 1 and not being aggressive. When Joel Embiid looks like the player that we expect from him, this is what the Sixers can look like. When Ben Simmons is playing aggressively instead of just floating. When Tobias Harris is actually part of the team instead of playing 41 minutes and getting exactly 4 points. These Sixers can be really, really good. We know this. The starting five is one of the best 5-man lineups in the entire NBA. But there's just such small margin for error because that bench is so short and because, frankly, there's, I think, some pretty serious roster construction issues with the Sixers team.
Reid, what is your concern level? What do you see for the Raptors in this series and presumably going forward in this postseason?
I'm not concerned, not at all in this series. The Magic have been really, really good. Like, believe it or not, they have the number 1 defense in the NBA since January 30th. And yet they had to have everything go right for them to beat the Raptors. You're not going to get another 25-point game from DJ Augustine. You're not going to get another 0-point game from Kyle Lowry. You're not going to get a game in which the Magic plays so well and the Raptors play so poorly. To me, yeah, that was an impressive win by the Magic. It was also a little bit fluky. I just don't think that's sustainable. The bigger question is, going forward, what's the concern level? I'm not particularly concerned about them in this series. Next series, that's when things start to get really interesting. Like I said before, the Sixers at their best, they can't just beat the Raptors. They can beat any team in the NBA, and I include Golden State Warriors in it. But can the Sixers really be at their best for an entire 7-game series against a Raptors team that has more playoff experience, that has more switchability, more versatility, and that has a guy in Kawhi Leonard, even given the fact that he has taken a pretty clear step back over the past couple of years with the injury concerns, he's still a former Finals MVP. He's still a guy who's an MVP caliber player when he's at his best. So I picked the Rockets to go to the Finals going into the season. I picked the Raptors going into the Finals going into the season. I picked them to go to the Finals going into these playoffs. I'm going to stick with that, even with that first game that, there's a couple concerns that come out. I just don't see them as those big structural concerns that I do with those 76ers.
All right, Reid, in a few minutes, we're going to do Bill's big bet of the night. I would be 4-0 if it wasn't for Kevin Durant and the Warriors blowing that lead. I'm really tempted. Nuggets, 7.5-point favorites at home tonight. Greg Popovich, that's a big dog for a Greg Popovich team. I'm not sure I like the Spurs to win. I like the Spurs, I think, to cover. We'll get to that in a few minutes. What do you expect from this Pop-led team against a good Denver team that's still pretty inexperienced in terms of postseason play?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's probably a pretty solid bet on your part. What I thought from this Denver team in Game 1 was a team that didn't look like it had been in the playoffs before, because they haven't. This team hasn't been in the playoffs since 2013. They're so young. They're the second youngest roster in the NBA. They have an incredibly bright future, and I still think they will probably win this series. But I think at this point, it's kind of a coin flip. You have to assume when you have a 2 seed against a 7 seed, even a 7 seed with the Spurs that has an incredible Hall of Fame coach, that has the sort of playoff experience they have, you have to assume that the 2 seed is going to come out guns blazing in that Game 2 after losing Game 1. But let's be honest. The final 2.5 months of the regular season, I know we look at the Nuggets as a 2 seed. They've been pretty much exactly the same team as the Spurs. When you look at the record, virtually identical over the past 2.5 months. Net ratings, virtually identical. The Nuggets played, I thought, a pretty poor game in Game 1. You have to assume that the shots start falling for them in Game 2. And I think I'm with you, though. I think the Spurs, the way this defense has turned around from being absolutely miserable at the beginning of the season to being pretty darn good considering the personnel at the end of the season, I think this will end up being a close game.
Reid, at the start of the series, Vegas Thunder Portland. Vegas actually had Oklahoma City as the favorites, and now Portland with a 1-0 lead, trying to take a commanding 2-0 lead tonight, are slight favorites. It switched a little bit, but it's close. It's close to a coin flip, at least according to the fine folks in Las Vegas, Nevada. Who do you like in this series, and how far, whoever wins, do you think that team goes in this postseason?
I think this series is going to 7. I think both of these teams are really talented and have some very distinct flaws. My apologies to that man right there, Enes Kanter, because I did not expect. I thought he was the biggest weakness for the Blazers going into this series. It wasn't just that Jusuf Nurkic wasn't able to play because of that broken leg. It was that the guy that they replaced him with is just a sieve on defense. He was a capable defensive player, and he was awesome on the board. He was awesome offensively. He was the reason that the Blazers won. I think this series is going to 7, and I'm probably going to switch my pick. I had picked the Thunder in 7. I think I'm going to pick the Blazers. Feel very uncertain about it, but why? Paul George. I thought coming into this series, the biggest injury concern was Jusuf Nurkic and everything that I just said about him. The fact that he can't play, he was so big to the Blazers' success this season. But to me, Paul George, he don't look right. I know he shot 5 of 14 from 3, but several of those were in garbage time. Like when the threes that mattered, he was coming up short on almost all of them. He does not look like the same player after the All-Star break, because at All-Star break, he might have been my pick for MVP. I didn't really crunch the numbers at that point, but he was absolutely awesome. He doesn't look right. Is he going to be able to look right by game 2? Is he going to be able to stay right throughout the rest of the series? Remember, this is a guy who just a few days ago couldn't lift his arm above his head. It's a shame to see that happen, but that is the reason I'm going to pick the Blazers in 7.
Reid Forgrave, my colleague here at CBS Sports HQ. As always, buddy, thanks for making time for us.
Great talking to you, bud.
All right, Reid Forgrave on the program. Haven't talked any Russell Wilson. He's not just a great quarterback. He's now a very, very wealthy man. We'll go inside the numbers on his new contract and the season he's coming off that justified it when we come back to Writer's Block here on CBS Sports HQ in just a couple of moments. All right, welcome back into Los Angeles, California. I'm Bill Reiter, and on the West Coast, Russell Wilson. And I think Seahawks fans, very, very happy man, very, very happy fan base. Russell Wilson's about to make a bunch of money. We're going inside the numbers on one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL. We start at the number 140 because Russ got paid. The Seahawks have extended Wilson to a 4-year, $140 million contract. Makes him the highest paid player per annual salary in the history of the NFL. The deal also included a $65 million guaranteed signing bonus party at Russ's house. How about the number 6? Russell Wilson is now the highest paid player in the NFL, making that $35 million per year. But if Wilson were in the NBA, he would rank 6 on the annual pay scale. He'd be behind Russell Westbrook, Chris Paul, Steph Curry, LeBron James, and yes, congratulations, Minnesota, Andrew Wiggins. How about 16? A part of why Wilson is getting paid is his clutch factor. In 2017, he broke Eli Manning's record for the most touchdown passes in the fourth quarter in a season with 16. There was one fourth quarter pass Wilson definitely wants back, though, costing him and his team a Super Bowl. Next up is 19. Wilson also has the most touchdown passes in a 5-game span without throwing an interception with 19. Wilson did this back in 2015. Number 2 is next up on Inside the Numbers. Russell Wilson was drafted in the 3rd round by the Seahawks, and since 2006, he's one of 2 quarterbacks listed under 6 feet to be drafted, the other being Johnny Manziel. Kyler Murray will become the 3rd very, very soon. Finally, 7.9 among active QBs. Russell Wilson has the highest pass yards per attempt at 7.9, just ahead of Big Ben, Aaron Rodgers, and Phillip Rivers. Guy had an incredible year last year, kind of obscured by some of the other storylines, Patrick Mahomes and other things. But the guy is certainly worth the money for a Seattle organization that clearly depends on him to do the things they want to do. Congratulations to that guy. It's nice to see people get paid. I didn't get paid last night. Unfortunately, it's time for Bill's big bet of the day. What a bummer. 3-1. I was on the Warriors. I felt so smug about it last night, too. Texted buddies, 4-0. I had a little bit of money on that game, too, like a little more than normal. Thank you, Warriors. Thank you, Kevin Durant, for that. All right, so I feel good about this one. This one feels, I didn't like the lines last night. I really like Spurs plus the 7. It's down to 7 right now, plus the 7. Denver is still trying to figure out how they feel and how they operate in the postseason. They're a really good team, a basketball team. They don't have a go-to guy. Greg Popovich and his squad, but really Popovich, 22 straight postseason appearances against a Denver Nuggets team that in the years ahead is going to be really good. But this is the beginning of that learning curve, and that is hard to do in any situation against any team, let alone the masters of the playoffs and Greg Popovich at the helm. I don't know if the Spurs win the game. They might, but Spurs plus 7 feels like a mortal lock. I feel like tomorrow 4-1 can be flapping down on that little graphic. I'm Bill Reiter. This is Reiter's Block on CBS Sports HQ. Thank you for being here. By the way, we got some great guests coming up for you next week as the draft gets closer, including Nick Bosa, so stay tuned for some of those big names. We're going to keep it rolling from Stamford, Connecticut right now. The guy's going to get you caught up on what is trending in sports. And, of course, Sportsline has you covered for all your needs in 30 minutes. We'll see you tomorrow. Thanks for hanging out here on the show.